sure the red light's on.
Dawn Drake, I was the first one last time too. Dawn Drake, 552 Ayers Street, Exit, New Hampshire. I have a couple questions. I got to meet with the principal at Central. She changed, you made a suggestion last time. My granddaughter was in Spanish with no teacher, so she wasn't being taught. So I went down and met with the principal. So we switched her into a Spanish class with a substitute. I was quite happy until I learned the Spanish teacher doesn't speak Spanish. They're waiting for a Spanish teacher to be approved to come into Central. So now she's in a Spanish class with a substitute, not being taught Spanish, with 32 students in the class. I also had the opportunity to see the report of how many students are in Central, in the classes. And I was also told by the principal of how many students are in the classes at Central. I saw his report and was guaranteed by him personally that there was no way possible that he can get his classes under 30 without more teachers. And that was between me and him. And I'd also like to address the issue of transportation for my granddaughter. We live 4.3 miles from the bus pickup. I live on Ayers Street. For her to be picked up, she must walk from Ayers Street to Deerhead Street, Bartlett Street, to Bicentennial Drive, down Donati Drive, West Alice Ave, out to DW Highway, to the Bank of America. I addressed this issue with Goffstown Transportation. There are no sidewalks whatsoever to walk this walk. It's 4.3 miles. They said it's a requirement for students to walk 1.5 miles to the bus stop. I was told this was my problem, on top of paying $100 for a bus pass. Right now, we are transporting her ourselves. Now, if I wanted her, also another route would be 3.3 miles for her to pick up the bus, which would mean during the winter, she would have to walk DW Highway because the sidewalks there are not plowed. Transportation, once again, is unacceptable. So, my question to you is, does this make it a hardship for my student to go to Central? And does this make it a hardship for me to keep her in Central? And does this make it a hardship for me now? Can I pull her out of Central and put her in another school? That's my question to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opportunity for the public to address the board.
Hello, I'm Patricia Ottenreith. I live at 8 Summerfair Street. I have more of questions, and I'm hoping this would be an appropriate time for me to ask them if I can't get an answer today. I was curious to know, and I've heard this kind of question asked around the community, what happens if we give Central 180 days and on the 178th day, they have 30 substitute teachers come in to fix their class sizes? Does that change, or does it have to be, and I know that sounds silly, but at this point my concern is that we're a cash cow to Manchester, and I don't think they can function without their tuition students. So I think they're going to be desperate to fix it. And do I think they can fix it all year? No, but could they fix it in time to cut that 180 days off to go, ta-da, we're less than 30 students per class? Anybody know that answer?
And just make a quick response. I mean, my 2 cents. Oh, go ahead.
Well, if you want, well, I'll
Mine's real quick. That's not the only issue that they'd have to fix. So hopefully, the letter will state several things, and you know, they'd have to fix all of those items that we assert as material breach.
Okay, all right, so it's not just that one thing.
I would just like to add too that I believe it's the Commissioner of Education that will determine whether it is a breach. So if technically they had 1 or 2 days of school with small classes, I think the Commissioner of Education would have to look at that and see if they really thought that that was a realistic thing or an anomaly.
And is it, and I'm assuming it would have to be a sustainable thing, that they anticipate that they would not be in breach again starting in September?
I would hope so.
Okay, and my second question was more for Dr. Littlefield, and I was curious to know, and I know Auburn probably has different tuition numbers and different student numbers.
If I could, and this is purely a technicality.
3 minutes?
No, if you could address the board,
Okay.
and then
If
it's a
it's-
technicality, but
No,
I'd like
that's
to
okay,
make
I
everyone
apologize.
aware of it.
Do we know what the tuition agreement was with Auburn as compared to how much we're paying to go to Central? How much Auburn paid to go to Pinkerton? Is it comparable to what we pay as a town now to go to Central? Was there a big shift is what I'm wondering?
No,
Yes, you can.
no.
Okay,
And who knows in the future what Pinkerton tuition will be, but our tuition, I'm talking about Hooksett, our tuition plus capital costs is about equal to the Pinkerton tuition
all right, and I know.
right now.
Okay, one more quick question. I know Trish was commenting about a lot of people like Central, and I was just wondering if there ever was an issue that we had a new contract, maybe to settle some other people, that they would have the option, basically, if they wanted to take life in their own hands and just, not have an adequate education. I'm wondering if that would be something that could be an option to other people if they're satisfied with what they're getting. Just throwing that out there as an option, and I don't know if it is.
Sorry, just a real quick comment, sorry. Well, the superintendent mentioned that the contract that Auburn has allows for 5%. So if we had a similar contract with a district,
Okay.
not Manchester, students could go to Manchester if they're within that 5%, I would imagine.
I would
if
just
that's
comment that
what we
if
have.
we get close to a vote, that we want to make sure that people have that information. So if they're, woohoo, Manchester, go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Lebeck, 29 Moore Road. Members of the board, I went to Pinkerton my freshman year. I failed 6 classes. I'm a product of Derry. I left Pinkerton because class size and 3,000 students on a campus is a college campus. As a 13, 14-year-old student, that's very overwhelming. They do have freshman academy to alleviate that issue. Short of getting out of Manchester, we got to do anything to get out of Manchester. The public is drooling at Pinkerton. I cautioned the board and I asked the board to get your numbers. What is the graduation rate? What is the percentage of freshmen who take a kneecap test their junior year? They have retention issues. Some students don't ever take the test. Therefore, your students who struggle don't have to be a district in need of improvement if you don't take the test. So just be aware, do your homework, do your research. Bigger is not always better. More opportunities to take classes, great. If you're that third line hockey player, you're not making the team in 4 years. So parents have to realize, if you're an athlete who struggles, bigger, you're trying out against 300, 400, 500 kids for a particular sport. Be aware, because bigger is not always better. Lastly, we look to you, the board, to guide us. I call it bickering, but it disgusts me. And I understand this professional judgment, all this that's going on. But what is more sickening to me is leaving this meeting, this video will be posted and people will solicit support based upon this video, and I find it repulsive. You are town, you're elected by us, do right by us. Do whatever you have to do to make an agreement, a gentleman's handshake, move on. But I ask you, stop with the publicity, stop with it. It's enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Tanya Tarbell, 21 Granite Street. My question is, you were talking a lot about philosophical effects, so my question kind of goes to that. If we end up looking at either multiple different schools or one in particular, and you said that there could be like 5% of people, or whatever our percentage is, that goes to a different place, are those people going to be then subject to the JCA, JCB, or is it just 5% and then go? Or like, are those people having a choice, or is that what it's called, JCA, JCB? Okay, that's my question.
It sounds like you're asking about an agreement that does not exist at this time. If you're asking about Auburn,
Right.
how Auburn's work,
Yeah.
okay, then I'll ask the superintendent to answer how Auburn's works.
Very well. I think the right answer to your question would be, they're not dependent on each other. Whatever policy the board has in place that determines how youngsters are able to go somewhere other than our primary school is what would be in place. So policy won't change necessarily because our tuition agreement changes.
So then those people, we'll say 5% for the argument's sake, those people who are the 5% will not necessarily have to make that request through the board, or it will just be any random people?
I can't speak for the board. I think it's a premature question because we don't have we're trying to hypothesize what we're trying to do, what we might do with a tuition agreement that we don't have. And I think it's a good question and probably something the board would want to talk about if and when we were negotiating a contract. And if that 5% were in the Hooksett contract, like it is in the Auburn contract, I think the board would want to ask itself, how do we go about, what's the approval process for that 5%?
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chair? As a school board member, and what we went through over the last year, any student that wants to go to a different school than the one of record currently has to satisfy either JCA or JCB with this board. And currently our school of record is Manchester. If we signed a contract with another school, it would be our school of record. And my feeling is, unless the policy of this board changes, someone would have to satisfy one of those two policies, and then we would deal with a percentage if in fact there was a percentage in place. Thank you.
So my last question then is any of that contingent like upon how we're choosing, like if we decide to send all our kids to one school versus if we break them up to two different schools?
Oh, I didn't know you were just looking at me. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's so early that the board is still weighing all its options. I think David talked a little earlier about the fact that we have a meeting tomorrow night of a committee that's going to be gathering data. And my assumption is that they're going to be really focusing on these 5 or 6 or 7 schools that and we should add Concord to that too, because I have talked to the superintendent in Concord, and there's limited space there as well. But I think that it's just premature.
Can I please speak to that? I just wanted to say that I've lost my thought here. I'm sorry.
Me all the time.
Oh, I just wanted to point out for the public's notice that, and I asked this question of Dr. Littlefield. It is legal for a town to have a contract with more than one school at the same time, as long as everyone is aware that you're entering a contract with another school. So a multi-school contract is certainly an option, probably more complicated, and you can imagine you may not get a good deal with one if they know that you're dealing, with another. But just so the public knows, it is allowed, and it is something that we certainly are going to look at. So, just for your information.
Thank you.
Kathy O'Hara, 2 Marcel Way. I had a couple things that I want to talk about. One, it was the JCB. When you do send it to the lawyer, I wanted to make a recommendation, having spent a lot of time with the lawyer, having done the appeal last year, and some of the things that he talked about. If he does express specific concerns, I would ask you, please get him to not give a very vague answer, but very specific concerns. What could happen? Break it down to, is his concern that someone could get sued? What would that entail? Would it entail cost to Hooksett? And what would that cost be? So for example, it might be if a lawsuit was to occur, because that was the big discussion last year, what would it occur? It seems like it would be the difference between what we pay Manchester and the other school. So that might be $1,200 to $6,000 depending on which school they're going to. Then compare it to the consequences of people taking it to the Department of Education and how much that actually costs the state of New Hampshire. Having gone through the process, the town lawyer had to be involved in a pre-hearing, another hearing, the superintendent had to go to it, the principals had to go to this hearing. There's a lot of other consequences that come out from policies. So really, if he has concerns about lawsuits, compare the cost of a lawsuit to what we had to go through. I think there were at least 2 people that did it last year, and I think it probably was very costly, not only to the town, but to the state. In looking at Cheryl's concerns, I just want to let you know that, if you were, I don't want to minimize anybody's financial situation, especially during these economic times, but to make a difference of what you pay Manchester to what you pay Pinkerton, breaking it down, even if you were to get a part-time job at $8 an hour, it would be about 150 hours. Now, we're all pretty busy, but that would be 10 hours a week for 15 weeks. There are other ways of doing it too. So I think that there are ways that people can cover those costs. There is one school that's a lot more, which is Bow, which maybe people wouldn't have that option, but Pembroke and Pinkerton are around the same. So when you're making a decision, really think about that, or if the policy could be changed to help those people in financial aid. But really, it has to be determined that they need financial aid. In addition to that, as people know who have been here over the past year, and I have one child in Central and one in Pinkerton, and I have a little class, I have like a case study going. Both my children are Algebra 2 and do 2 different schools, which is very interesting. My freshman is just zipping along, going fine. My junior, who is at Central, has over 39 kids. In the past couple of weeks, 10 to 12 of the kids have been moving in and out, and the teacher's having a very difficult time teaching such a tough subject. So already I can see a huge difference in the 2 schools. But what I want to say, not only is it the number of people, the transfers in and out, catching up, trying to keep the kids going, and the teacher just really struggling with a subject like that and having 39 kids. I mean, even 30 kids might be a difficult situation. Additional information about Central. They're mixing the levels as well. I know that's not in the contract, but if you mix level 2 and 3, what level are they going to come out at the end of the year? It's going to have to average out somewhere, and it's probably going to go down to the lower level to get all these kids taught. So as we're making these evaluations of Central, I think we really have to take in what consequences that we have, not only the number of people, but also how it's affecting the students and what they're learning and where they're going. and I know the high school committee will get a lot of information. But I think one of the biggest issues was that Central decided not to send out the schedules early. They've done this every year. They did not mail it. They told the students they were not going to mail it because it cost so much to put a stamp on it, and that you would get it when you came. Ultimately, if they had sent those schedules out early, guidance counselors came in early, things could have gone a lot more smoothly. So there's a lot of little logistics that went on that really caused a lot of issues. I don't think they're going to resolve very quickly. And in the meantime, our students are really falling behind in their classes as compared to other people. And where my daughter's a junior and some people are senior, it's going to affect their SAT scores. It's going to affect, what they're going to get done. A friend of ours had to make a decision between AP Chemistry and band, because they've cut so many. That sounds simple to you, but when you're a senior and you're trying to apply to Ivy League schools, you have to have an instrument and you're supposed to do your AP Chemistry. So those are other aspects. It's not just numbers. There's so much more going on there. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Connie Hansky, 11 Misty Lane. I want to talk a little bit about the new bus routes that were posted today. I know that the intention was to get all the kids to school for 8:45, to increase the learning time and everything. My daughter last year never made it on time because she had to do the Underhill Memorial. So for the first time she was able to, and I wasn't one of the complaining parents. And now I've told today that it's reverting back to the way it was. So now she's going to be one of those children that are getting there late. And I just didn't know if there could be consideration versus it has to be either last year's schedule or this year's schedule, but maybe looking into the affected buses that get there late to see if there could be a small change on those routes versus just a drastic change to going back to the way it was before, because it wasn't perfect for all the kids then either. Just wanted it to be re-looked at versus just going back to the way it was before.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Dave McPherson. I live at 28 Springwood Drive. And I have, I think, a question and just a comment after that. I'll start with the question. We talked about some of the schools in the surrounding area. We brought up Goffstown, Londonderry, Bow, Pembroke. Dr. Littlefield just talked about Concord. The one school that, to me, is in our area that I don't know may or may not have the ability would be Bedford. Just kind of want to throw that out there and kind of see what the thought is on that. That's kind of my question. Is Bedford a school that's worth looking into? I know it's very young.
I can say that the board directed the superintendent to have discussions with alternative schools. So I'll look to you for how you pick the school.
I think it's a great suggestion, because I'd rather ask now than get done with this whole process and have somebody say, and as a Bedford resident, I would welcome your tuition money.
Thank you.
I will contact the superintendent and see if there's an interest.
Okay, thank you. And my comment is, I moved to town 9 years ago with no children, and part of the decision my wife and I made at the time to move up here was the growing town, and by the time you have children, there'll be a high school in town and you'll be all set. And I was like, awesome. I'm like, this place is beautiful, I like it up here. That was kind of a selling point. Me being naive, not really looking at the figures and being like, is that really realistic or not? I'm like, I have no children. The soonest it's going to happen is 17, 18 years. I've now been here 9 years. My oldest is in 2nd grade. I have a son in 1st grade as well, and I'm now kind of like, wow, if shovel's not put to the ground in 2 years, that thought of mine of 17 years is pretty realistic, because now not going to happen. So, not that I'm looking for answers right now, so oh my God, we have to go to high school. I just want to make sure that we keep that on the table as something to look at. We've had a contract with Manchester, it sounds like, for a long time, and now we're looking at ways around that. We're going to hopefully enter into a contract with at least one other school district, possibly two, whatever the case might be, but still for the parents in town that have the younger children to kind of keep that as an option. I know, like I said, realistically, at this point where we are, if something doesn't happen in a couple of years, my children are going to miss out on that. Just making sure that with the growing town as the way it is, that the parents right now that are moving to town going, oh, when my kid at high school age in 17 years, the town will have a high school. So that's just a comment that I wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speak to that, please.
Please.
Dave, I just wanted to tell you that this spring, we had a very comprehensive high school study done, and I believe it's on the website. It really broke down what some of the other districts paid, their median income hours, and so forth. So it's probably worth looking at to see what you might think based on that study, what the likelihood is. It in my opinion, was a little daunting to see a high school at this time with the economy, but it's a very good report. You might want to check that out.
Thank you.
Anyone else?